let's go ahead and move on to our first bit of fun on art. I think Sarah is here online. I thought I saw her. She is.
Yes, hi.
Okay, great. Great. So we're going to now actually, we transitioned last week from the Romantic period into the Impressionistic period. We're now going to actually transition into the modern era, which starts about the 1870s and moves for about 100 years into the 1970s. We're actually not going to start with the early part of the modern era with folks like Picasso and others, but actually move right into kind of an interesting part of American art, where art kind of becomes more illustration used for marketing and advertising purposes with Norman Rockwell. I'm sure you've all heard of Norman Rockwell. He's been responsible for at least several hundred covers of the Saturday Evening Post magazine, and kind of had a way of focusing on people, kind of human behavior, and putting them in interesting, humorous, almost idealistic situations. So over to you, Sarah.
Morning, everyone. Yes, so we are focusing on Norman Rockwell today. He was born on February 3rd, 1894 in New York City. And he knew he wanted to be an artist at a young age. He dropped out of high school at 16 and attended classes at the National Academy of Design. In 1916, at 22 years old, he painted his first cover for the Saturday Evening Post, which, as AJ mentioned, began a 47-year-long relationship with the publication. Rockwell's work was dismissed by a lot of serious critics during his lifetime. His work was seen as kind of overly sweet in the opinion of modern critics, especially some of the covers of the Saturday Evening Post, which leaned towards idealistic portrayals of American life. Rockwell said, quote, "Maybe as I grew up and found the world wasn't the perfect place I had thought it to be, I unconsciously decided that if it wasn't an ideal world, it should be, and so painted only the ideal aspects of it." So let's look at some of his work. I'm sure some of you are familiar with this. This is Rosie the Riveter. It's Norman Rockwell's Rosie the Riveter, I should say, because at the time there were many different versions of this painting. So this was done, this was the cover of the Saturday Evening Post on Memorial Day, May 29th, 1943. Rosie the Riveter was a cultural icon of World War II. She represented the women who worked in factories and shipyards during World War II, producing war supplies and munitions. And images of different representations of Rosie the Riveter appeared everywhere at the time. So another Rosie the Riveter that is still popular today is the "We Can Do It" poster, which was actually created by a Westinghouse war campaign. But Rockwell's image shows Rosie taking her lunch break with a rivet gun on her lap. Beneath her, you can see, if you look below her, you could see a copy of Hitler's manifesto, Mein Kampf. And the model for this painting was a 19-year-old named Mary Doyle Keefe. And an odd fact about this painting is that Rockwell actually painted Rosie larger than Keefe was and had to go back and apologize to her after its publication. However, this painting was extremely popular at the time, and the magazine actually loaned the image to the US Treasury Department. This next one is titled "Working on the Statue of Liberty," and this painting appeared on the cover of the July 6th, 1946 cover, and displays men working on cleaning the amber torch of the Statue of Liberty, which is actually a task taken on every July, I didn't realize. This painting came into the possession of Steven Spielberg, actually, who later donated it to the White House in '94, where it still resides. And it has been displayed in the Oval Office by Presidents Clinton, Bush, and Obama. And it was recently taken down by the current administration and replaced with a portrait of Andrew Jackson. On to the next. This one is titled "The Problem We All Live With." This was painted in 1964, and it depicts Ruby Bridges at 6 years old. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Ruby Bridges. She is being walked to elementary school by 4 US Marshals because of the threats she received for desegregating a white school in 1960. This particular image has become an iconic image of the civil rights movement and was actually the centerfold piece in a magazine called Look. So this was not the Saturday Evening Post. At this time in 1964, Rockwell had recently ended his relationship with the Saturday Evening Post because he felt stifled by the limits the magazine had on political themes. Another odd fact about this painting, actually, is that the painting was used to dress O.J. Simpson's house during his 1995 murder trial. His lawyer, Johnny Cochran, hoped to evoke the sympathy of visiting jurors who were mostly Black by including, quote, something depicting African-American history. Kind of an interesting fact about that one. This next one is called The Spirit of 76, painted in, yes, 1976. And Norman Rockwell actually did many paintings for the Boy Scouts of America, and this was his last one he did. It was one of, actually, the reason I included it, it's one of 7 paintings of his that were stolen from the Elaine Galleries in Minneapolis in 1978, so only 2 years after it was painted. This was actually one of the last 7 to be recovered. It was found in Brazil in 2001 by an FBI investigation. And they had known that the last 3 paintings were in Brazil since 1999, but because of a treaty between the US and Brazil, they couldn't actually retrieve them until 2001. And the reason they ended up discovering where it was is an art dealer in Rio reached out to, I think it was the Norman Rockwell Museum or some auction house, and said, I have all these paintings, I'd like to sell them to you. And they were like, whoa, 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 these are stolen paintings. And the art dealer hadn't stolen them, but somehow came into their possession. And this last one, I'm sure some of you are familiar with. This is a really famous one of his. So we're jumping slightly back in time to 1961. And this painting depicts a saying I'm sure many of you are familiar with: do unto others as you would have do unto you. In 1955, Rockwell took a trip around the world with Pan Am and took a lot of different photos of people from different cultures. And so as I mentioned before, once restricted from showing people of color on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post, this painting actually features people from different ethnicities, religions, and cultures. And I will leave you with this quote from the Norman Rockwell Museum website. Rockwell was a compassionate and liberal man, and this simple phrase reflected his philosophy. Having traveled all of his life and been welcomed wherever he went, Rockwell felt like a citizen of the world, and his politics reflected that value system. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
An artist that almost everybody has been exposed to and knows about.
Right.
Yes. I think just one additional comment. This was a period of tremendous change in our lives, and Americans' lives in particular, but with the introduction of technologies, both from the late 1800s to the 1970s, with mechanical technologies around engines, steam engines, the Stirling engine, technologies around chemistry, and the introduction of petrochemicals and synthetics in terms of developing new fibers and materials for everybody, and then also finally into the electronic age. And so it's a lot of change for Americans, and I think a lot of folks felt that his artwork kind of brought, kind of centered everybody around kind of just basics of human behavior amidst all that change. All right. Well, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Next week's, I think we're also going to highlight someone else from the same, but perhaps a little bit more contemporary times of the modern era. So we'll look forward to hearing from you next week.